This happened about 10 years ago, give or take. My buddy Craig and I had nothing going on the next day, so we figured we'd head over to our friend Eric's place. He'd just started dating someone new, and the plan was to chill for the night. Maybe drink a little, hang out, just unwind. Eric was staying at his mom's apartment complex temporarily, and behind the place there was this thick patch of woods. Not just a little row of trees or anything. It was a legit wooded area that felt like it stretched for miles. This was upstate New York, and it was that perfect fall weather. Cool, crisp air, colorful leaves, and just enough daylight left to feel cozy. We cracked open some beers and wandered out into the woods behind the apartment. Just 3 guys and Eric's girlfriend tagging along, all of us laughing and carrying on. Eventually the beers ran out, so we made a quick store run for more and came right back. What we didn't really think through was how fast it would get dark by the time we returned. It was that time of day when the sun dips behind the trees, and you don't realize how little light is left until you're already in the middle of the woods. We had talked about starting a fire, but we hadn't even brought anything to get one going yet. We found ourselves in this open area, kind of like a small clearing, where a couple narrow trails split off in different directions. It was quiet and calm, but something just didn't sit right with me. As we're standing there joking around, I caught a glimpse of something, or someone, just beyond the trees. At first, I figured it was a weird-shaped tree, or maybe my eyes playing tricks on me in the fading light. But something about it felt off. I nudged Craig and asked if he could see it too, and at first he said no, then paused. Oh wait, yeah, what the hell is that? Sure enough, we weren't seeing things. There was a guy, massive, just standing there in the shadows, dead still, like he was watching us. He wasn't close enough to make out his face, but close enough to tell that he wasn't just wandering. He was standing there, and it felt intentional. I tried to subtly get Eric's attention, hoping not to alert this guy that we'd spotted him. But Eric, being Eric, was in full, nothing can hurt me party mode. I tried to tell him to look ahead quietly, and instead he just yells out, "Yo, is that Bigfoot?" Like it was a joke. I chuckled nervously, trying to play along, but my stomach was doing somersaults. Now at this point, we'd wandered too close to just back out without it being obvious. The guy was huge, not like bodybuilder big, but just naturally tall and broad. And there was something about how still he was, just watching. No movement, no expression, just still. We hesitantly said hello, trying not to sound nervous. And then Eric, this guy, man, he walks right up to him. Starts talking to him like he's some long-lost friend or something. He's like, "Dude, we thought you were an alien out here, like straight-up xenomorph with the second mouth and everything." And then starts mimicking the creature from Alien, waving his hands around like an idiot. Eric's girlfriend, who was younger and pretty quiet the whole night, looked mortified. She didn't say much, but her body language said everything. She was scared, and I don't blame her. Craig and I are standing there trying to figure out how the hell we're going to de-escalate this mess without freaking anyone out. We didn't want to run and make it obvious we were scared, but we also didn't want to hang around and see what happened next. Then this guy finally speaks. "You guys drinking out here?" he says, and we kinda nod. He's like, "Cool, I got some stuff too." And he walks over to the tree line where he's got a beat-up old backpack leaning against a trunk. He grabs a beer with one hand, but I noticed that with his other hand, he reached in and quietly slipped something into the front pocket of his hoodie. I didn't see exactly what it was, but I got a bad feeling. Like, real bad. Looked like it could have been a blade. As he cracks open the beer and comes back over, I casually glance around the area, trying not to be obvious about it. And that's when I see another person. Further off in the woods, moving along the trees like they're circling around us. I couldn't make out any details, but it wasn't a deer or anything like that. It was a person, and they were creeping, like trying to stay out of sight. That's when I knew we needed to go, immediately. I threw out a quick excuse like, "Aw man, I forgot I gotta be up early for work tomorrow. Craig's my ride, so we're gonna dip." Eric, of course, being completely oblivious, blurts out, "What? You told me you had the day off." I gave him a look like, "Dude, help me out here," and said, "Nah, you misheard. I definitely gotta be up." Eric shrugs and goes, "All right, later guys, drive safe." Like this wasn't a potentially dangerous situation or anything. Craig and I started heading out fast but not running, trying to stay calm. And once we were far enough away, I told him about the second person I saw creeping around behind us. We knew we had to get Eric and his girlfriend out of there, so we came up with a plan. Craig called him and said, "Dude, your mom's outside in the parking lot looking for you and she's pissed." Eric may not have feared sketchy strangers in the woods, but he did fear his mom. It worked. He grumbled and swore under his breath, but finally decided to leave the woods. I don't think his girlfriend minded being pulled out of there. To this day, I have no idea what we walked into. Some people think it was just a homeless guy and his buddy hanging out in the woods, maybe even getting ready to crash for the night. Others think we interrupted a drug deal. This happened maybe 4 or 5 years ago, back when I was still living with my mom on this quiet little farm surrounded by dense woods. We were out in the sticks, but not completely isolated. There were other farms around, just not exactly next door. Each neighbor was maybe half a kilometer away, so we had a good mix of privacy and safety. That balance made me feel pretty secure, probably a little too secure in hindsight. I used to go on walks at night like it was nothing, sometimes around 7 or 8 p.m., and there were nights I'd be wandering the back road at 2 in the morning if I couldn't sleep. Looking back, yeah, that was dumb. I had a walking loop I stuck to pretty religiously. The first half was open and ran along the front of the farms, mine included, so if anything went sideways, chances were someone might see me, or I'd at least have enough cell signal to call for help. But the second stretch? That part cut through a wooded area about 200 meters thick and ran behind all the farms for about 2 kilometers. That's where the creepy stuff happened. This one night, I can't remember the exact time, but it was pitch black aside from my flashlight beam. I was just about to hit the bend in the trail that would take me out of the trees and back into the open part, when I heard something. Someone. Just this flat, emotionless voice calling out, "Help!" It wasn't a shout or a scream. It was quiet, almost robotic. Just that word, over and over again. "Help! Help!" I yanked out my headphones, killed my music, and just stood there trying to figure out if I was hearing right. And sure enough, the voice kept going. Same tone, no change, no urgency. For some reason, my first thought was, oh no, someone's in trouble, like I was a little kid trying to save the day. I was maybe 16 or 17, but that naive instinct kicked in before anything else. Thankfully, my brain caught up and basically screamed, "Nope, this is how people go missing on true crime podcasts." So I started slowly backing away. Now here's where it gets worse. My cat had followed me out on the walk like she usually did. But instead of retreating with me, she was creeping toward the sound. Ears back, low to the ground, hissing softly. I was quietly whispering her name, trying to coax her back without making too much noise, but she wasn't budging. I didn't want to leave her, but I also didn't want to stand there playing tug-of-war with a cat while someone potentially dangerous was lurking in the dark. Eventually, I just ran up, scooped her into my arms, spun around, and booked it back the way I came. Full-on sprint. And yeah, I realized turning my back to whoever was out there might not have been the best move, but I was panicking. Every horror movie cliché was playing in my head. Like any second, I'd feel a hand grab my shoulder. I didn't hear footsteps behind me or anything, but that didn't matter. I didn't stop running until I was inside the house, door locked, cat still in my arms. But even though I was freaked out, I couldn't get that voice out of my head. What if someone did need help, and I just ran off like a coward? So I told my mom what happened, and somehow convinced her to drive me back out to that spot, which, in retrospect, was kind of insane. We stayed in the car and called out, hoping someone would answer. But it was just silence. No movement, no sound, nothing. We didn't get out of the car, thank God. After a few minutes of eerie quiet, we drove home. The next morning, though, I still couldn't shake the feeling, so I asked her to drive me out there again. And this time we actually walked around a bit, just in the immediate area. I had this awful feeling like maybe we were going to find a body or something. I know that sounds extreme, but the voice was just so off. It sounded like someone in shock or completely detached from what was happening to them. But we didn't find anything. No signs anyone had even been out there. And to this day, I still have no idea what I heard that night. No face to go with the voice. No explanation. Just a memory that creeps me out every time I think about it. Maybe it was someone messing around. Or maybe I dodged something way worse than I'll ever know. Who knows? So this happened a few years ago on one of those perfect summer afternoons. You know the kind, not too hot, sun's out, and everything just feels peaceful. I was driving home from my friend's place, taking the scenic route, when I passed this tiny park tucked off the side of a quiet road. I'd heard it had some hiking trails that led to these insane cliff views over a valley and forest. I'd only ever seen pictures online, but they looked incredible, like something straight off a postcard. Since I had time to kill and the weather was too nice to waste, I figured, why not go check it out? The parking lot was totally empty when I pulled in, which I actually liked because it meant I'd have the trail to myself. I parked, checked out the map by the entrance, and chose the path that looked the least intimidating. It was wide and mostly flat, with just a few small hills and some rocks to hop over. The trail was pretty open, not too much brush, and no real twists or turns. Basically the perfect little hike for someone trying to relax. About halfway through, I came over this small hill that led down to an open clearing. As I reached the top, I noticed this older man sitting alone on some rocks at the bottom. He looked like someone's sweet grandpa. White hair, kind face, just sitting there, staring out into the trees. When I got closer, he smiled and said, "Where are you heading?" I told him I was just trying to find the cliffs everyone talks about. At first he seemed friendly, but his face shifted pretty fast. "You should be careful," he said, still smiling but in a way that felt off. I thought maybe he was just being a concerned adult. I mean, I'm barely 5 feet tall and looked like a teenager back then, so I figured he assumed I might not be ready for a cliff hike. I thanked him politely and started to walk past, but he spoke again. Same words, totally different tone. "No, you really need to be careful." He was staring now, eyes locked on mine, voice completely flat. Trying to ease the tension, I told him I'd hiked a lot before and knew what I was doing. But then he said something that made my stomach turn. "A lot of teenagers come out here to see the cliffs. A lot of them never make it back." He paused, then added, almost like someone's pushing them. I wanted to believe he was joking, just a weird old man with a dark sense of humor. But there was nothing funny about the way he looked at me. His eyes were cold. The way he said it, it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like a threat. I tried to brush it off, chalked it up to me being overly paranoid, which I definitely am, especially in the woods. I thanked him again, turned, and kept walking. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I barely made it a few steps before this sense of dread just took over. I stopped, turned around to look back toward the clearing, and he was gone, completely vanished. I didn't hear him walk away, and there was nowhere for him to go without being seen. The path ahead was open, and the brush was too thin to hide in. Now I was officially creeped out. I practically jogged back the way I came, ears tuned in for every little sound around me. When I made it back to the parking lot, still completely empty, I realized something weird. If no one else was here when I arrived, then where did that man come from? And where the hell did he go? I got in my car, locked the doors immediately, and drove out of there as fast as I could. Nothing ever came of it. My tires weren't slashed. No strange faces in my rear view. and I never ran into that man again. But the whole thing haunted me. I never went back to see those cliffs, which is a shame because I still think about that view. But honestly, I just couldn't shake the way he looked at me, or how his voice sounded when he said that last line. Was he just a weird, overly cautious old guy? Maybe. Maybe he was trying to save me from something I didn't know was out there. Or maybe he was the one I needed saving from. I'll probably never know. So a while back, I worked this contract gig with a team that did fieldwork for the U.S. Forest Service. We were basically plant detectives, hiking through the wilderness in Southern California, hunting down invasive species, mapping them out with GPS, and yanking them out when needed. Since we were working under official contracts, we had access to all sorts of remote areas that the general public wasn't even allowed into. And trust me, the deeper into those woods you go, the weirder the stuff you stumble across. Now I've got more than a few creepy stories from those trips, but there's one that's always stuck with me. When I first started, we used to pass this rundown day-use area every day. It looked like something straight out of a horror movie, overgrown, forgotten, and full of random junk. The driveway into it had been blocked off with this heavy metal gate, but people still kept driving over the curb and going in like it was no big deal. Some had dogs, others took pictures, but a few just parked, carried stuff into the woods, and never came back while we were around. My boss always told us to skip it, claiming no invasive plants were ever tracked there, so we didn't really touch it for a while. After a few months working elsewhere, we got called back to that same stretch of forest. One day, we were assigned to walk this long, narrow canyon road, about 7 miles total. The old day-use area happened to be right off that road. I volunteered to cover that side of the road with 2 co-workers, and we figured, hey, maybe we'll finally check out that sketchy place. We had our usual gear with us: hose, saws, Pulaskis, and I carried a kukri knife on my belt just in case. Nature work isn't always peaceful. So we step into the area, and it's a mess. Abandoned appliances, shattered glass, some metal shelves that looked like they'd been there for years. But the weirdest part was these perfect square holes cut into the concrete, a few feet wide and pretty deep. No idea what they were for. Then we came across this big dirt mound covered with stones, and next to it were these stained rags. Half a skateboard was sticking out the top of the mound, and there was a wooden cross nearby. The skateboard had something scribbled on it. Diamond, maybe a name, but the dates were too faded to read. One of the guys thought it was just a pet grave, but I couldn't ignore the bloody-looking rags. Still, we shrugged it off and kept moving. We were logging plant data when we found this hidden corner of the area that opened into a whole other canyon. The satellite map confirmed it was a legit canyon we hadn't explored yet, so we took note of it. There was also this small building nearby, about the size of half a shipping container. Door was cracked open. I poked it open more with my hoe, pitch black inside. My coworker used his phone light to check it out, and immediately we saw porn magazines scattered everywhere, kids' clothing, some bedding. I didn't even wait to process it. I just turned and started walking straight back toward the road. As I got closer to the clearing, I noticed a pickup truck that definitely hadn't been there when we first walked in. It had driven around the gate and parked way off in a secluded corner. Couldn't see anyone inside or nearby. I just stood there awkwardly waiting for my coworkers to catch up. When they did, I pointed out the truck and one of them said the driver was probably hanging out in the old bathroom building off the road. I didn't love the idea of going near it, but I wasn't about to stand alone either, so I followed them. The building was shaped like a V, men's and women's bathrooms on either side, storage room in the middle. My buddies went into the men's side, which already looked like it had been busted into at some point. Same story inside, more adult mags, kids' clothing, and bedding. But here's where it got worse. There was a hole cut into the bathroom wall leading into the storage room. One of my coworkers poked his head through to peek inside. Suddenly, I'm standing outside, and I hear the doorknob on the storage room start to rattle. And then I hear my guys yelling, and one of them grabs his Pulaski and just slams it into the door handle repeatedly. A few seconds later, some man bolts out of the bathroom and takes off deeper into the day use area, right back toward the building we had just checked out. Turns out my coworker had shined his light into the storage room and saw the guy crouched in the corner of the dark room. The place was packed with boxes, kids' clothes, and bedding. We didn't wait around. We radioed a nearby fire crew for backup. A few of the hotshots came through, and they weren't messing around. They brought a chainsaw, ripped that door open, and set up lights. What they found inside was disturbing. Stacks of child porn mags, more children's clothing and blankets everywhere. We told them where the man ran, so they went to that little building in the back and discovered something none of us had expected. The structure wasn't just a shack. It extended back into the hillside, a hidden bunker. And that was where the investigation stopped for us. No one wanted to step a single foot further in there. Back in 2007, I was working on my PhD at the University of Florida and living solo in a little condo I owned in Gainesville. Around that time, one of my friends, we'll call him Captain, was on this wild mission to walk across the country. He decided to take a break from his journey and crash at my place for the winter. I wasn't home all that much since I spent most nights at my boyfriend's house, but still, having someone basically live rent-free in my space for months started to wear a little thin. So when spring rolled around and he asked if I could drive him back to the exact spot in Alabama where he had left off, I was like, "Yeah, sure, let's get you walking again." The drive out wasn't bad, probably around 5 or 6 hours, and I dropped him off in the early evening, then turned right around to head back to Gainesville. That's when things got weird. Instead of taking me back the same way I came, my GPS suggested this faster backroad route through rural Alabama. And I mean deep backwoods, barely any lights, tiny roads, and that classic middle-of-nowhere vibe. It was already late, and now I'm winding through dark country roads I've never seen before. Definitely had that deliverance energy. At some point, I noticed a car had gotten behind me. No big deal at first. Maybe they were just on the same oddball route the GPS gave me. But after a while, it stuck with me through every turn, even after I accidentally missed my original left turn and took the next one instead. The car mirrored every move. That's when it really hit me. I wasn't just being followed by chance. Someone was tailing me on purpose. I called my boyfriend to help me find the local non-emergency police number, but of course, he thought I was being dramatic. He was distracted with something and basically brushed me off, which made me even more frustrated. I didn't want to call 911 unless I was sure something was going down, but looking back now, I should have done it anyway. The situation kept escalating because I was getting dangerously low on gas, and there hadn't been a station for miles. So not only was I being followed, but I was going to have to stop the car, alone, in the middle of nowhere. The worst part? I couldn't even get a look at the driver. The windows were tinted dark and the roads were pitch black. I kept thinking maybe it was some weird local rivalry thing, like maybe they saw my UF Gators license plate and were an Auburn or Alabama fan just messing around. But even that didn't make sense. This was way too intense to be a harmless prank. Whether they knew I was a woman or not, the way they were sticking with me felt calculated, and honestly a little sinister. Eventually, I made it into a town big enough to have streetlights and open businesses, and I felt just a little safer. I decided to send a message to the driver that I knew what was going on. At the next red light, I turned all the way around in my seat, stared straight at them, and pretended I was on the phone giving their description. I held eye contact the whole time the light was red, hoping it would spook them. Soon after that, I found a well-lit gas station, pulled in with my driver's side right next to the store entrance, and ran inside. I told the cashier someone had been following me for over an hour. He came around the counter, looked out the window, and said there was no one out there. I could have sworn the car was right behind me, but I guess seeing me bolt inside made them ditch the scene. Either way, it was chilling. The guy stuck with me for almost 100 miles. That's not random. That's stalking. I never found out who it was or what they wanted, but the whole thing left me on edge for weeks. After filling up, the cashier pointed me back to the freeway, and the rest of the trip was thankfully uneventful. But I'll tell you right now, I was still shaking by the time I got home, and furious that my boyfriend hadn't taken it seriously. This happened not too long ago. I work in childcare, and one of the kids I look after had recently developed a pretty big obsession with hiking. He kept talking about caves and trails and all that stuff. So one day I figured I'd take him to this really cool trail I'd been to before in Salt Fork State Park. There's this spot called Hosak's Cave that's not really a cave. It's more like a big rock overhang with a little waterfall trickling down, super pretty and wide open. The trail to get there is only about half a mile, and it used to be pretty well traveled, which is why I picked it, short and safe. Now here's the thing. A bunch of summer storms had hit the area recently, and I didn't realize just how much damage they'd done to the trail until we got there. What used to be a nice, wide path was now more like a skinny ledge barely a foot wide in some places, with a good 6-foot drop down into a rocky creek bed. Not exactly ideal. But there was a small crew doing some bridge work not too far from the trailhead, so I felt okay enough to go on. Plus, the kid was all amped up and totally ready to tackle it, so we just went for it. We made it all the way to this viewing platform near the cave, but it was roped off with some signs saying it was closed, probably because of the fallen trees everywhere. Still, we were already there, and the cave was just a bit farther, so we carefully made our way around it and climbed down through some tree roots. We ended up hanging out at the cave for a while, mostly because it was kind of tricky to get to, and the kid was having the best time ever. He found this little puddle full of baby salamanders and was just so into it. I honestly hadn't seen him that happy in forever, so I let him play and catch them for almost an hour. Now, while we were up there, I did notice a few weird things. There was an old candle sitting on a rock with a heart carved into it. Definitely had a vibe, but I assumed it was from some couple trying to make it romantic. Higher up, near the edge, we spotted 2 more candles and a few stacks of rocks that looked deliberately placed. I was starting to feel a little unsettled at that point, but didn't say anything. I just kept an eye out, you know? Eventually, we decided to head back, and here's where things got really weird. When we climbed back to that same platform area, remember the one with the tree roots, we both noticed this soaked washcloth just hanging right there, right in the middle of the path. That thing was not there before. I know that for a fact. The kid saw it too, but he didn't pick up on how strange it was. I, on the other hand, felt my stomach twist. In that moment, 2 things were immediately clear. 1, someone else was out there watching us. 2, whoever it was, they had managed to sneak close enough to leave that washcloth without ever being seen. That trail was narrow, with no real way to double back or loop around. There was no place to run if something went wrong, and I wasn't about to freak the kid out. So, I told him to lead the way back and just kept encouraging him, over and over, telling him how great he was doing, just trying to keep things moving. We never saw anyone on the trail. But once we got to the car, I locked the doors right away. And just as we were leaving the park, I saw this man step out from the woods, not far from the road. He looked like he hadn't showered in weeks, probably mid-30s, and he just stared at me, like deep, soul-piercing eye contact. His face was totally blank, no expression, just following me with his head and eyes as we drove by. That's when I knew. This guy wanted me to see him, like he was confirming everything I had already feared. That stare haunted me for days. I couldn't shake it. Part of me tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was camping and didn't want to startle us. Maybe we just caught him off guard. But the truth is, he had plenty of time to do whatever he wanted while we were distracted catching salamanders. And the fact that he left that washcloth behind, after sneaking close enough to place it, that felt deliberate. like he wanted me to know we weren't alone. The kid had no idea anything weird happened. To this day, he still talks about that hike like it was the best day ever. Meanwhile, I was barely holding it together the whole time. Honestly, it was one of the most disturbing experiences I've ever had, and I still get chills thinking about that stare.